The rejection letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, stamped with the official seal of Naval Special Warfare Command. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell held the crisp white envelope in her calloused hands, already knowing what lay inside before she tore it open. The words swam before her eyes like a familiar nightmare made real. Application for Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training denied. Reason: does not meet minimum physical standards for program requirements. Before we jump back in, tell US where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. She had known this moment would come, had prepared herself for it through months of grueling preparation that had pushed her body beyond every limit she thought possible. Yet seeing those cold, clinical words printed on official letterhead felt like a physical blow that knocked the breath from her lungs. 26 years old, standing 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing barely 130 pounds, Sarah Mitchell had just been told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough to earn the right to attempt the most demanding military training program in the world. The irony wasn't lost on her that she was reading this rejection while standing in the supply room of Forward Operating Base Crimson, a dusty outpost in the mountains of Afghanistan where she had spent the last 8 months proving exactly how wrong that assessment truly was. Outside her makeshift office, the sounds of military life continued their familiar rhythm. Helicopters thrummed overhead, carrying wounded soldiers to medical facilities. Convoy vehicles rumbled past her window, heading toward hostile territory, and the constant chatter of radio communications filled the air with updates from patrol. Units scattered across some of the most dangerous terrain on Earth. Sarah had grown up in a small, farming town in rural Nebraska. The daughter of a mechanic and a nurse who had taught her that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle life placed in her path. Her childhood had been spent fixing tractors with her father and helping her mother tend to injured animals that wandered onto their property. She had learned to shoot before she could drive, had mastered basic medical procedures before her 15th birthday, and had developed the kind of quiet confidence that comes from growing up in a place where self-reliance wasn't just valued, but absolutely necessary for survival. When she enlisted in the Navy at 18, her recruiter had taken one look at her small frame and unremarkable test scores and suggested she consider administrative work or perhaps medical training. Sarah had smiled politely and signed papers for combat engineering instead, choosing a military occupation that would put her directly in harm's way alongside the infantry units she wanted to support. Her decision had raised eyebrows among the career counselors who couldn't understand why someone with her academic potential would choose such a physically demanding and dangerous specialization. Boot camp had been brutal in ways that her rural upbringing hadn't fully prepared her for. The physical training pushed her body to its absolute limits every single day, leaving her exhausted and sore in muscles she hadn't known existed. But while other recruits complained about the difficulty or looked for ways to avoid the most challenging exercises, Sarah approached each obstacle with the same methodical determination she had used to repair complex machinery back home on the farm. When she couldn't complete the required number of push-ups on her first attempt, she stayed after hours to practice until her arms trembled with fatigue. When the obstacle course times proved too challenging, she studied the most efficient techniques used by the fastest recruits and adapted them to work with her smaller stature. Her drill instructors had initially viewed her with skepticism that bordered on condescension. Petty Officer First Class Martinez, a career Navy veteran with 2 combat deployments and a reputation for breaking recruits who didn't belong in his program, had made it clear from day one that he considered Sarah's presence in combat engineering training to be an administrative error that would correct itself soon enough. He assigned her extra duties, subjected her to more intensive physical training, and created obstacles specifically designed to highlight the disadvantages of her size and strength compared to her male counterparts. But instead of breaking under, The additional pressure, Sarah had thrived in ways that surprised everyone, including herself. She discovered that her smaller frame allowed her to move through confined spaces that larger recruits found impossible to navigate. Her mechanical aptitude, honed through years of working on farm equipment, translated perfectly to the complex demolitions and construction tasks that formed the core of combat engineering work. Most importantly, her rural background had taught her to solve problems creatively rather than relying on brute force, a skill that proved invaluable when conventional approaches failed to achieve the desired results. By the end of boot camp, Petty Officer Martinez had become one of her strongest advocates, writing a recommendation letter that described her as one of the most naturally gifted combat engineers he had encountered in 15 years of training recruits. Her graduating class had voted her the recipient of the Leadership Excellence Award, recognizing not just her individual achievements, but her ability to help struggling classmates overcome their own obstacles and succeed in the program. Advanced individual training had taken her to Fort Leonard Wood in Missouri, where she learned the specialized skills that would define her military career: explosive ordnance disposal, bridge construction, obstacle removal, defensive fortification, urban breaching techniques, and combat marksmanship filled her days with challenging coursework that required both intellectual precision and physical courage. She excelled in every area, consistently ranking in the top 5% of her class despite being the smallest student in the program. Her instructors at Fort Leonard Wood had been career soldiers with combat experience who evaluated students based on performance rather than preconceptions about physical limitations. Staff Sergeant Williams, a decorated combat engineer with 3 deployments in Iraq and Afghanistan, had recognized her potential early in the training cycle and pushed her to attempt increasingly difficult challenges that stretched her capabilities. Under his mentorship, Sarah had learned to use explosives with surgical precision, mastering techniques that allowed her to breach fortified positions or clear obstacles with minimal collateral damage. The specialized training had also introduced her to advanced marksmanship techniques that would prove crucial in her later military service. Working with weapons ranging from standard infantry rifles to specialized sniper systems, she discovered that her smaller frame actually provided advantages in terms of stability and precision that larger shooters often struggled to achieve. Her natural patience, developed through years of hunting in the Nebraska countryside, translated perfectly to the long-range shooting that required absolute stillness and perfect timing. Upon completion of her advanced training, Sarah had been assigned to the 11th Combat Engineer Battalion, a unit with a reputation for taking on the most dangerous missions in active combat zones. Her commanding officer, Major Thompson, had been initially skeptical about assigning such a small soldier to frontline combat operations, but her training records and instructor recommendations had convinced him to give her a chance to prove herself in a controlled environment before making any final decisions about her deployment status. Her first deployment to Afghanistan had begun with routine engineering tasks at secure bases far from active combat zones. Road construction, facility maintenance, and basic demolitions work had given her the opportunity to apply her training in real-world conditions while building the experience and confidence necessary for more challenging assignments. But even these relatively safe missions had provided glimpses of the courage and competence that would later make her legendary among the units she supported. During a routine convoy escort mission in her 3rd month of deployment, her engineering team had encountered an improvised explosive device that had disabled the lead vehicle and trapped 2 soldiers in the burning wreckage. While other members of her unit had taken defensive positions and called for backup, Sarah had immediately moved toward the damaged vehicle, using her small size to crawl through debris that blocked access for larger soldiers. Working under enemy fire, she had successfully extracted both wounded soldiers and provided emergency medical care that saved their lives. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, Subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The incident had earned her a Bronze Star for valor and the respect of infantry units throughout the region, who began specifically requesting her team for high-risk missions that required engineering support. Word of her courage and competence had spread through the military community, creating a reputation that would eventually lead to opportunities far beyond anything she had imagined when she first enlisted. It was during her second deployment that Sarah had first encountered members of Naval Special Warfare units operating in her area of responsibility. A SEAL team had requested engineering support for a direct action mission against a high-value target in a heavily fortified compound. The mission required precise breaching of multiple barriers while maintaining operational security and minimizing the risk of civilian casualties. Sarah's reputation for precision demolitions work had led to her selection for the support role, despite the fact that such missions were typically reserved for more senior engineers with extensive combat experience. Working alongside the SEAL operators had been a revelation that changed the entire trajectory of her military career. She had watched these elite warriors plan and execute their mission with a level of professionalism and competence that exceeded anything she had previously witnessed. Their physical conditioning, tactical knowledge, and mental toughness represented the absolute pinnacle of military excellence, and she had found herself drawn to their world with an intensity that surprised her. The SEAL team leader, a quiet professional known only as Chief Patterson, had observed her work during the mission with the analytical eye of someone who recognized talent regardless of its packaging. Her ability to breach the compound's defensive barriers with surgical precision, combined with her calm performance under extreme pressure, had impressed him in ways that he later described as unprecedented for someone so early in their military career. After the successful completion of the mission, Chief Patterson had approached her with an offer that would haunt her thoughts for months afterward. "You've got the skills and the mindset for this work," he had said simply. "Have you ever considered applying for BUD/AS training?" The question had planted a seed that grew into an obsession, driving her to research every aspect of SEAL training and requirements with the same methodical determination she applied to all her professional goals. The more she learned about Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL training, the more convinced she became that it represented the ultimate test of everything she valued most about military service. The physical challenges would push her body beyond its current limits. The mental pressures would test her ability to think clearly under extreme stress. And the teamwork requirements would demand the kind of selfless cooperation that she had always considered essential to military effectiveness. But the application process had revealed obstacles that went far beyond the well-known physical and mental challenges of the training itself. The minimum height and weight requirements, designed to ensure that candidates could handle the extreme physical demands of the program, effectively excluded her from consideration, regardless of her actual capabilities or proven performance in combat conditions. Her demonstrated expertise in demolitions, marksmanship, and small unit tactics meant nothing when measured against bureaucratic standards that reduced her to numbers on a chart. The rejection letter had been the predictable result of a system that prioritized conformity over capability, but it still stung with the sharp pain of dreams deferred and potential unrecognized. Sarah had known the odds against her acceptance were overwhelming, but she had hoped that her combat record and instructor recommendations might convince someone to look beyond the statistics and see the soldier she had become through years of dedicated service. Standing in her supply room office, holding the official denial of her application, Sarah felt the weight of every assumption and limitation that had been placed on her throughout her military career. She had proven herself capable of excellence in every assignment, had earned the respect of superiors and subordinates alike, and had demonstrated courage under fire that had saved lives and completed missions others had considered impossible. Yet none of that mattered when weighed against the simple fact that she didn't meet the physical profile that some committee had decided was necessary for success in SEAL training. The sound of explosions in the distance reminded her that she had more immediate concerns than her personal disappointments. Her engineering team was scheduled to support a convoy operation in 2 hours, and the mission briefing had indicated significant enemy activity along their planned route. Soldiers were depending on her expertise to get them safely through territory where improvised explosive devices and ambush attacks had become routine threats to every military movement. She folded the rejection letter carefully and placed it in her personal files, next to commendation letters and performance evaluations that told a different story about her capabilities and potential. The bureaucratic decision was final and non-appealable, but it didn't change her responsibility to the soldiers who trusted her with their lives every day. Whatever dreams she might have harbored about joining the elite ranks of Naval Special Warfare would have to wait while she focused on the dangerous work that lay immediately ahead. 2 hours later, Sarah found herself crouched beside the lead vehicle of a 5-truck convoy, studying a section of road that her trained eye recognized as a likely location for enemy activity. The terrain provided perfect concealment for observers. The road surface showed signs of recent disturbance that could indicate buried explosives, and the tactical situation forced their convoy to slow down precisely where enemies would expect them to be most vulnerable. Her team leader, Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, had learned to trust her instincts about such matters after months of watching her identify threats that others had missed. "What do you think, Mitchell?" he asked quietly, knowing that her assessment would determine whether they proceeded along their planned route or requested alternative guidance from their command center. Sarah studied the suspicious area through her rifle scope, looking for the subtle signs that distinguished natural terrain. Features from carefully constructed camouflage. Years of hunting in Nebraska had taught her to spot anomalies in natural patterns, and her military training had refined that skill into an ability to detect enemy activity that bordered on supernatural intuition. After several minutes of careful observation, she detected movement in a position that should have been empty if their route was truly secure. "Contact, 11 o'clock, approximately 400 meters, she reported calmly, her voice carrying the professional confidence that had made her a trusted member of countless high-risk missions. At least 2 individuals in concealed positions, likely spotters for an ambush or IED trigger team. The convoy immediately took defensive positions while Sarah coordinated with their supporting aircraft to neutralize the threat she had identified. Her precise target designation allowed the air support to eliminate the enemy positions with minimal collateral damage, clearing the route for safe passage and preventing what could have been a devastating attack on the convoy. The successful identification and elimination of the threat had been routine by the standards Sarah had established throughout her deployment, but it represented exactly the kind of tactical awareness and calm performance under pressure that SEAL training was designed to develop and test. She possessed the skills, temperament, and proven performance record that should have made her an ideal candidate for elite military training. Yet the bureaucratic barriers remained as insurmountable as ever. As their convoy continued toward its destination, Sarah reflected on the disconnect between her demonstrated capabilities and the institutional limitations that prevented her from pursuing the military challenges she most wanted to attempt. She had proven herself capable of exceptional performance in combat conditions, had earned the respect and trust of some of the most demanding soldiers in the military, and had consistently exceeded expectations in every assignment she had been given. The irony was that while she was being denied the opportunity to attempt SEAL training because of concerns about her physical capabilities, she was simultaneously being entrusted with life and death responsibilities that required exactly the same combination of physical courage, mental toughness, and tactical expertise that the training was designed to develop. Every mission she completed successfully was evidence that the assumptions underlying her rejection were fundamentally flawed. Her radio crackled with a priority message from their base operations center, requesting immediate engineering support. For a developing situation at a remote outpost that had come under coordinated attack, the mission would require her team to travel through hostile territory, establish defensive positions under enemy fire, and conduct complex demolitions work while maintaining security for evacuation operations. It was exactly the kind of high-risk, high-stakes mission that she had volunteered for when she chose combat engineering as her military specialty. The physical demands would test every aspect of her conditioning and endurance. The tactical complexity would require split-second decision-making under extreme pressure, and the potential consequences of failure would affect the lives of soldiers who were depending on her expertise for their survival. Sarah checked her equipment with the methodical precision that had become second nature through years of dangerous work, ensuring that every tool and weapon was properly secured and immediately accessible. Her personal gear had been customized through trial and error to work optimally with her smaller frame, allowing her to carry the same combat load as larger soldiers while maintaining the mobility and agility that were essential to her survival in hostile environments. The modified load-bearing equipment distributed weight more efficiently across her body. Specialized weapon configurations improved her accuracy and handling characteristics, and carefully selected protective gear provided maximum protection, while minimizing the bulk that could interfere with her movement through confined spaces. Every piece of equipment had been tested and refined through actual combat use, creating a personal combat system that was perfectly adapted to her unique physical characteristics and tactical requirements. As their convoy prepared to depart for the emergency mission, Sarah felt the familiar surge of anticipation and focus that preceded every dangerous operation. The rejection letter that had arrived that morning seemed like a distant memory, irrelevant to the immediate challenges that would test every skill she had developed through years of training and combat experience. The soldiers around her prepared their equipment with the quiet professionalism that characterized veterans who had learned to trust each other completely in life-and-death situations. They had worked together through dozens of high-risk missions, had saved each other's lives on multiple occasions, and had developed the kind of unshakable mutual confidence that could only be forged through shared danger and proven competence. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached her with the mission briefing documents, his expression reflecting the seriousness of the tactical situation they were about to enter. The outpost is under coordinated attack by an estimated Platon-sized enemy force, he reported. They've got multiple casualties and are requesting immediate demolition support to collapse approach routes and prevent enemy infiltration. The mission parameters were clear but challenging in ways that would test every aspect of their training and experience. They would have to establish security in a contested area, assess complex demolitions requirements under enemy fire, and execute precise explosive placement that would achieve tactical objectives without endangering friendly forces or civilians in the surrounding area. Sarah reviewed the available intelligence data with the analytical approach that had made her one of the most reliable combat engineers in the theater of operations. Satellite imagery showed the outpost's defensive layout, enemy approach routes, and potential demolitions targets that could be used to channel attacking forces into predetermined kill zones or block their advance entirely. The tactical problem was complex but not unprecedented, requiring the kind of creative thinking and technical expertise that she had developed through months of similar challenges. Her proven ability to improvise effective solutions under extreme pressure had made her the preferred choice for missions where standard procedures were insufficient and innovative approaches were required for success. Timeline? She asked, already beginning to formulate the equipment requirements and tactical approach that would be necessary for mission success. Wheels up in 15 minutes, Rodriguez replied. Flight time approximately 20 minutes, then immediate insertion into a hot landing zone. Enemy activity is heaviest along the northern approach routes, but they've got overwatch positions that can engage us anywhere around the perimeter. The compressed timeline meant that detailed planning would have to occur during the flight, with final tactical decisions made based on real-time assessment of conditions at the objective area. It was exactly the kind of fluid, high-pressure situation that separated competent soldiers from exceptional ones, requiring the ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances while maintaining focus on mission objectives. Sarah completed her final equipment checks and joined her team at the helicopter landing zone, where their transport aircraft was already warming up for immediate departure. The familiar sound of rotor blades and turbine engines filled the air with mechanical urgency that matched the tactical situation they were about to enter. As she strapped herself into the aircraft's uncomfortable web seating, Sarah reflected on the strange contrast between her morning's disappointment and the afternoon's opportunity to prove herself once again in actual combat conditions. The same physical capabilities that had been deemed insufficient for SEAL training would soon be tested in ways that were arguably more demanding and certainly more dangerous than any training scenario. The helicopter lifted off with the mechanical violence that characterized military aviation, climbing rapidly through dusty air toward an uncertain tactical situation that would require every skill she had developed through years of professional military service. Below them, the familiar landscape of Afghanistan spread out in harsh beauty, marked by the geometric patterns of human conflict that had shaped this region for decades. During the flight, Sarah reviewed the tactical options available for the 5 Kelfer demolitions work that would be required at their destination. The enemy attack pattern suggested a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm the outpost's defensive positions through simultaneous pressure along multiple approach routes. Her mission would be to use controlled explosives to block or channel those approach routes, buying time for evacuation operations while maintaining escape routes for friendly forces. The technical challenges were significant, but manageable with proper planning and execution. Different types of explosive charges would be required for various terrain features. Timing would be critical to avoid interfering with friendly movement, and placement would have to be precise enough to achieve desired effects while minimizing collateral damage to structures that might be needed for continued defensive operations. 20 minutes after takeoff, their pilot announced final approach to the objective area, warning the passengers to prepare for tactical landing procedures that would minimize their exposure to enemy fire. Sarah could hear the distinctive sounds of small arms fire and explosions that indicated active combat was continuing around the outpost they were approaching. The helicopter descended rapidly through defensive fire, its door gunners returning suppressive fire against muzzle flashes visible in the gathering dusk. Sarah felt the familiar combination of fear and excitement that preceded every combat operation, her body automatically going through the mental checklist that would ensure optimal performance once they reached the ground. The aircraft touched down hard in a swirl of dust and mechanical noise, its crew chief immediately dropping the rear ramp to allow a rapid exit for the engineering team. Sarah was the first soldier off the helicopter, moving immediately toward cover while scanning for threats and assessing the tactical situation that would determine her approach to the mission ahead. The outpost's defensive positions were clearly under significant pressure, with enemy muzzle flashes visible along multiple approach routes that converged on the small facility. Friendly forces were maintaining disciplined fire control from prepared positions, but the volume and coordination of enemy fire indicated a serious threat that would require immediate action to prevent potential overrun of the facility. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez appeared beside her, pointing toward a series of terrain features that represented the most likely approach routes for enemy assault forces. "We need to block those draws and channel them into the kill zone on the eastern approach," he shouted over the noise of ongoing combat. "How long do you need for placement?" Sarah studied the target areas through her night vision equipment, calculating the explosive requirements and placement options that would achieve the desired tactical effects. The work would require movement through contested terrain under enemy observation, but the potential benefits justified the risks if execution could be completed successfully. 30 minutes for placement, plus another 10 for detonation sequence, she replied, already beginning to organize the equipment and personnel that would be required for the mission. I'll need covering fire during movement to the placement. Sights and clear communication for final coordination before detonation. The plan was tactically sound but operationally challenging in ways that would test every aspect of her training and experience. Success would require precise technical work under extreme pressure, perfect timing to avoid interfering with friendly operations, and physical courage to complete the mission despite enemy fire directed specifically at preventing her success. As she prepared to begin the most dangerous engineering mission of her deployment, Sarah reflected on the morning's rejection letter and the bureaucratic assessment that had deemed her insufficiently capable for elite military training. In less than an hour, she would demonstrate exactly how wrong that assessment truly was, though the only witnesses would be soldiers whose lives depended on her competence rather than evaluators whose opinions could advance her career. The irony was both bitter and motivating, driving her to approach the mission ahead with an intensity that went beyond professional duty and touched something deeper about proving herself worthy of challenges that others had decided she wasn't qualified to attempt. Every successful explosive placement would be evidence that capability couldn't be measured by statistics alone, and that true military excellence came from performance under pressure rather than conformity to predetermined physical standards. Sarah moved through the darkness with the fluid precision of someone who had learned to navigate hostile terrain as naturally as walking down a city street. Her modified equipment allowed her to carry 40 pounds of specialized explosives while maintaining the mobility essential for survival in contested areas. Each step was calculated to minimize noise and avoid silhouetting herself against the ambient light that could make her visible to enemy observers positioned in the surrounding hills. The outpost's defensive perimeter stretched across approximately 200 meters of rocky terrain that provided natural choke points for approaching forces. Enemy fighters had been probing these positions for hours, testing defensive responses and looking for weaknesses that could be exploited during a coordinated assault. Sarah's mission was to eliminate those tactical options by reshaping the terrain itself, using controlled explosions to create obstacles that would force attacking forces into predetermined kill zones. She reached the first placement site after 10 minutes of careful movement through terrain that offered minimal concealment from enemy observation. The target was a natural rock formation that created a covered approach route directly toward the outpost's most vulnerable defensive position. Properly placed charges would collapse the formation into an impassable barrier, while leaving escape routes open for friendly forces already in position. Working by feel in near total darkness, Sarah began preparing the explosive charges with the mechanical precision that had been drilled into her through hundreds of hours of training and practical application. Her hands moved automatically through procedures that had become muscle memory, even as her mind remained focused on the tactical situation developing around her position. Enemy muzzle flashes continued to appear sporadically along the ridgelines that dominated the surrounding terrain. The sporadic fire suggested probing attacks, designed to identify defensive positions and weapon capabilities rather than serious assault attempts. But intelligence reports had indicated that the main attack would begin within the hour, making her demolitions work a race against time that would determine whether the outpost could be successfully defended. The technical requirements for the first placement were straightforward but demanded absolute precision in a tactical environment that allowed no margin for error. Too little explosive force would fail to achieve the desired terrain modification, while too much could create debris patterns that blocked friendly escape routes or damaged defensive positions that were essential for continued operations. Sarah calculated the charge requirements based on rock density, fracture patterns visible in her night vision equipment, and the specific tactical effects required for mission success. Her engineering training had taught her to visualize explosive effects with mathematical precision, but combat experience had refined that knowledge into an intuitive understanding of how controlled explosions could be used to shape battlefield conditions. The placement process required her to work within arm's reach of enemy positions, close enough to hear conversations in languages she didn't understand, but could interpret through tone and urgency. The enemy fighters were clearly preparing for coordinated action, their radio communications becoming more frequent and their movement patterns suggesting final preparations for assault operations. After completing the first placement, Sarah moved toward the second target area through terrain that offered even less concealment than her initial route. The second position was a narrow defile that provided the most direct approach to the outpost's northern defensive positions. Blocking this route would force attacking forces to use longer approach paths that exposed them to defensive fire for extended periods. The movement between positions took her directly through an area that enemy forces had been observed using for staged equipment and personnel. Fresh footprints in the sandy soil indicated recent activity, and the careful arrangement of rocks suggested prepared positions for weapons or observation equipment. Sarah modified her route to avoid these areas while maintaining progress toward her objective. Enemy contact came without warning as she approached the second placement site. Muzzle flashes erupted from positions that had appeared empty moments before, forcing her to take cover behind a boulder formation that provided marginal protection from small arms fire. The enemy shooters were close enough that she could hear brass casings hitting rocks after each shot, indicating they were within 50 meters of her position. Sarah's response was immediate and decisive, drawing her sidearm and returning accurate fire while moving toward better defensive positions. Her marksmanship training proved invaluable as she engaged multiple targets in rapid succession, using available cover to mask her movement while maintaining suppressive fire that kept enemy fighters from achieving effective shooting positions. The firefight lasted less than 3 minutes, but felt like hours as Sarah maneuvered through hostile terrain while carrying explosives that could kill her instantly if struck by enemy fire. Her small stature proved advantageous as she used terrain features for concealment that larger soldiers couldn't have accessed, allowing her to outflank enemy positions and engage them from unexpected angles. When the shooting stopped, 2 enemy fighters lay motionless among the rocks, while a third had retreated toward higher ground where he could observe her activities and coordinate with other hostile forces in the area. Sarah knew that her position was now compromised and that enemy reinforcements would be directed toward her location within minutes. Working with desperate efficiency, she completed the second explosive placement while monitoring radio communications that indicated increasing enemy activity throughout the area. The charges were positioned to create maximum disruption of the approach route while providing enough standoff distance to protect her during the detonation sequence that would come later. The third and final placement site required movement across open ground that would expose her to observation from multiple enemy positions. Intelligence reports had indicated at least a dozen hostile fighters in the immediate area, with additional forces moving into position for the anticipated assault on the outpost. Sarah's demolitions work was becoming increasingly dangerous as enemy forces concentrated their attention on preventing her mission success. She began the movement toward the final position using fire and maneuver techniques that maximized available concealment while minimizing exposure time in areas where enemy observation was most likely. Her route took her through a dry creek bed that provided some cover from direct observation, but also created potential killing zones where enemy forces could concentrate fire if they detected her movement. The sound of heavy weapons fire from the outpost's defensive positions indicated that the main enemy assault was beginning earlier than anticipated. Rocket-propelled grenades and machine Gunfire were now being exchanged at volumes that suggested serious combat rather than the probing attacks that had characterized earlier enemy activity. Sarah's mission timeline was compressing rapidly as tactical conditions evolved beyond the original planning assumptions. Radio communications from the outpost indicated that defensive positions were under increasing pressure and that immediate demolition support was critical for preventing enemy breakthrough along the northern approach routes. The urgency in the transmissions made it clear that her explosive placements were no longer just tactically advantageous, but absolutely essential for mission success and friendly force survival. Sarah reached the final placement site as indirect fire began impacting around the outpost's perimeter. Enemy mortar rounds were creating a coordinated barrage designed to suppress defensive positions, while assault forces advanced through the approaches that her demolitions work was intended to block. The timing had become critical in ways that left no margin for delay or tactical modification. The final explosive placement required working directly adjacent to the most active enemy approach route, where hostile forces were already moving, in preparation for their assault on the outpost's defensive positions. Sarah could hear enemy fighters communicating in urgent whispers, less than 20 meters from her working position, their presence so close that any noise from her demolitions preparation could result in immediate discovery and engagement. Working in absolute silence, she positioned the charges with painstaking care while enemy fighters moved past her concealed position, carrying weapons and equipment for their assault operations. The explosive placement had to be perfect on the first attempt, as any need for adjustment would create noise and movement that would certainly be detected by hostile forces operating in immediate proximity. Combat engineering training had prepared her for technical challenges under pressure, but the current situation exceeded anything she had previously experienced in terms of immediate physical danger and tactical complexity. Every movement required consideration of both technical requirements and operational security, balancing mission effectiveness against personal survival in an environment where discovery meant certain death. The sound of approaching helicopters indicated that additional friendly forces were being inserted into the area, but their arrival would also signal to enemy forces that immediate action was required to achieve their objectives before reinforcements could affect the tactical balance. Sarah's demolitions work was becoming a race against time that would determine the outcome of the entire engagement. Enemy radio communications were becoming increasingly urgent as hostile forces coordinated their final assault preparations. Sarah could distinguish individual voices among the fighters positioned near her location, their conversations indicating detailed knowledge of the outpost's defensive layout and specific plans for breaching the perimeter at predetermined points. She completed the final explosive placement just as enemy assault forces began their coordinated advance toward the outpost's defensive positions. The charges were now in position to create the terrain modifications necessary for defensive success. But detonation timing would require split-second coordination with friendly force movements to avoid interfering with defensive operations. Sarah began her withdrawal toward the detonation control position through terrain that was now filled with moving enemy forces advancing toward their assault objectives. Her route took her directly through areas where hostile fighters were positioning heavy weapons and assault equipment, requiring her to move with absolute stealth while carrying the electronic detonation equipment that would trigger her carefully placed charges. The movement back to friendly positions was the most dangerous phase of her mission, as enemy forces were now fully committed to their assault and would respond to any detected threat with overwhelming firepower. Sarah's survival depended on remaining undetected while traversing hostile terrain filled with fighters who were actively searching for any sign of defensive preparations that might interfere with their attack plans. She reached the control position as the first enemy assault waves made contact with the outpost's outer defensive perimeter. The sound of sustained small arms fire indicated that serious combat was now underway, with both sides fully engaged in fighting that would determine control of the strategic position. Sarah's demolitions work would either succeed in channeling enemy forces into defensive kill zones or fail to prevent the breakthrough that would result in loss of the entire position. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez appeared beside her control position, his face reflecting the stress of coordinating multiple defensive operations while enemy forces pressed their attack from several directions simultaneously. "Status on the charges?" he asked urgently, knowing that the demolitions were now critical for preventing enemy breakthrough along the northern approach routes. "Ready for detonation on your command," Sarah replied, her finger positioned over the electronic trigger that would simultaneously detonate all 3 explosive placements. Charges are positioned to block primary approach routes while maintaining escape corridors along the eastern perimeter. The tactical situation was developing rapidly as enemy forces committed their main assault elements against defensive positions that were already under significant pressure. Radio communications indicated that several defensive positions were in danger of being overrun, making immediate demolition support essential for preventing complete enemy breakthrough. "Execute detonation in 30 seconds, Rodriguez ordered, coordinating the timing with defensive operations that required precise synchronization to achieve maximum tactical advantage. All friendly forces have been notified to take cover and prepare for immediate exploitation of the terrain modifications." Sarah initiated the detonation sequence as enemy assault forces reached the precise positions where her explosives had been carefully placed to achieve maximum tactical effect. The simultaneous explosions created a coordinated series of terrain modifications that instantly transformed the battlefield in ways that fundamentally altered the tactical balance between attacking and defending forces. The first detonation collapsed the rock formation that had provided concealed approach to the outpost's most vulnerable defensive position, creating an impassable barrier that forced enemy forces to expose themselves to defensive fire while seeking alternative routes. The explosion was precisely calculated to achieve terrain modification without creating debris patterns that would interfere with friendly defensive operations. The second explosion blocked the narrow defile that had provided the most direct enemy approach route to the northern defensive perimeter. The controlled collapse created a choke point that channeled attacking forces into predetermined kill zones where defensive weapons could achieve maximum effectiveness against concentrated enemy formations. The third detonation sealed the primary infiltration route that enemy forces had been using to position heavy weapons within effective range of the outpost's defensive positions. The explosion created terrain obstacles that prevented further enemy advancement while maintaining escape routes for friendly forces if tactical withdrawal became necessary. The immediate effects of the coordinated demolitions were dramatic and decisive in ways that exceeded even the most optimistic planning projections. Enemy assault forces found their carefully planned approach routes completely blocked, forcing them to attempt advances across open terrain where they were exposed to devastating defensive fire from prepared positions. The tactical transformation was visible through night vision equipment as enemy formations struggled to adapt to battlefield conditions that had changed instantaneously through Sarah's precisely executed demolitions work. Attacking forces that had been advancing with confidence through concealed routes were suddenly exposed in open areas where they could be engaged effectively by defensive weapons. Enemy radio communications reflected confusion and frustration as assault commanders attempted to coordinate new attack plans while under fire from defensive positions that could now engage them at maximum effectiveness. The carefully planned enemy assault had been disrupted by terrain modifications that made their original tactical approach impossible to execute. The defensive advantage created by Sarah's demolitions work allowed friendly forces to transition from desperate defense to controlled counterattack operations that systematically eliminated enemy forces trapped in exposed positions. The tactical momentum shifted decisively as attacking forces found themselves unable to advance or withdraw effectively through terrain that no longer provided the concealment they required for survival. Within 30 minutes of the detonations, enemy forces were conducting hasty withdrawal operations under fire from defensive positions that could now dominate all available approach routes. The coordinated assault that had threatened to overrun the outpost had been transformed into a tactical disaster for attacking forces who found themselves unable to achieve any of their operational objectives. Sarah monitored the developing tactical situation through radio communications that reflected the dramatic change in battlefield conditions created by her engineering work. Defensive commanders were reporting successful engagement of enemy forces at ranges and effectiveness levels that had been impossible before the terrain modifications created by her precisely placed explosive charges. The mission was successful, beyond all planning expectations, but Sarah found herself reflecting on the disconnect between her demonstrated capabilities under extreme pressure and the bureaucratic assessment that had deemed her unsuitable for elite military training. She had just completed one of the most technically challenging and tactically significant engineering missions of the entire deployment, yet official military policy maintained that she lacked the physical and mental capabilities required for advanced training programs. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez approached her position as enemy withdrawal operations continued under effective defensive fire that was systematically eliminating hostile forces throughout the area. His expression reflected professional respect earned through witnessing exceptional performance under the most demanding possible conditions. "Outstanding work, Mitchell," he said simply, knowing that her demolitions had saved lives and achieved tactical success that would have been impossible through conventional defensive operations alone. That was some of the most precise engineering work I've seen in 15 years of combat operations. The commendation was professionally gratifying, but Sarah found herself thinking about the broader implications of what she had just accomplished under conditions that exceeded the stress and complexity of any training scenario. She had demonstrated exactly the combination of technical expertise, physical courage, and mental toughness that elite military training programs were designed to develop and test. The irony was that while she was being officially told she wasn't qualified to attempt SEAL training, she was simultaneously completing missions that required the same skills and capabilities that such training was intended to develop. Her combat performance was evidence that the assessment criteria used for training selection were fundamentally disconnected from the actual requirements for success in military operations. As friendly forces continued their successful defensive operations against enemy forces that were now retreating through terrain dominated by defensive fire, Sarah began collecting her equipment and preparing for extraction back to their forward operating base. The mission had been completed successfully, but it represented just one of dozens of similar operations that had demonstrated her capabilities while official policies continued to limit her advancement opportunities. The helicopter extraction was conducted under much more favorable conditions than the insertion had been, as enemy forces were no longer in position to threaten aircraft operations around the outpost. Sarah found herself reflecting during the flight back to base on the strange contradiction between her proven performance and official assessments of her potential for advanced training. Her demolitions work had just saved an entire outpost from being overrun by numerically superior enemy forces, yet the same military system that relied on her expertise in life and death situations maintained that she wasn't physically or mentally qualified for elite training programs. The disconnect seemed to represent everything wrong with bureaucratic systems that prioritize conformity over capability. Upon return to forward operating base Crimson, Sarah completed the routine administrative tasks that followed every combat mission while thinking about the rejection letter that had arrived that morning. The official assessment of her unsuitability for SEAL training seemed increasingly absurd when contrasted with the tactical success she had just achieved under conditions that exceeded any training scenario in terms of stress, complexity, and immediate consequences for failure. Her after-action report documented the technical details of the demolitions, work and tactical results achieved through precise explosive placement under extreme pressure. The report would become part of her official military record, providing additional evidence of her exceptional performance in combat conditions, while having no impact on training opportunities that remained closed to her through bureaucratic limitations. The Base Operations Center was filled with activity as intelligence analysts processed information from the successful defensive operation and planned follow-up missions designed to exploit the tactical advantages created by the enemy's failed assault. Sarah's engineering work had contributed to a significant tactical victory that would affect enemy operations throughout the region for weeks to come. But as she reviewed mission reports and prepared equipment for future operations, Sarah couldn't escape the irony that her most significant professional achievements were occurring in an environment where her potential for advancement remained artificially limited by policies that measured capability through physical statistics rather than actual performance under pressure. The rejection letter remained in her personal files as a reminder that institutional barriers could persist despite overwhelming evidence that they were based on flawed assumptions about the relationship between physical characteristics and operational effectiveness. Her combat record was building a compelling case for reassessment of those policies. But bureaucratic systems were notoriously resistant to change, even when confronted with clear evidence of their inadequacy. 3 days after her successful demolitions mission at the outpost, Sarah received an unexpected summons to report to the base commander's office for a meeting that had been described only as discussing future assignment opportunities. The vague nature of the request was unusual in a military environment where administrative actions were typically preceded by detailed explanations of purpose and expected outcomes. Colonel Martinez was a career infantry officer with multiple combat deployments who had earned a reputation for recognizing and developing exceptional talent, regardless of conventional expectations about military specializations. His office walls were covered with unit citations and photographs from operations that had required innovative solutions to complex tactical problems. When Sarah reported to his office, she found that the meeting included several other personnel, whose presence suggested that the discussion would involve matters beyond routine administrative procedures. Major Thompson from her parent unit was present, along with a civilian whose appearance and demeanor suggested intelligence community affiliation, and a Navy officer whose uniform indicated special operations background. "Sit down, Mitchell," Colonel Martinez said, gesturing toward a chair positioned to face the assembled group. "We need to discuss some opportunities that have come to our attention based on your recent performance in combat operations." The tone of the meeting was professional but carried undertones that suggested the discussion would involve matters beyond routine military assignments. Sarah had learned to recognize when conversations were moving toward topics that required security clearances and operational discretion that went beyond normal military procedures. "Your demolitions work at Outpost 7 has attracted attention from several different organizations," Major Thompson began, referring to the successful defensive operation that had prevented enemy breakthrough through terrain modifications. "The precision and tactical effectiveness of your engineering work under extreme pressure has been noted by people who specialize in identifying exceptional capability." The civilian leaned forward slightly, his expression reflecting the analytical approach that characterized intelligence professionals evaluating potential assets for specialized operations. "We've reviewed your complete service record, including performance evaluations, training scores, and combat effectiveness reports. Your combination of technical expertise and performance under pressure represents exactly the kind of capability that certain programs are designed to develop and utilize." Sarah felt a surge of anticipation, mixed with caution as the conversation moved toward topics that clearly involved opportunities beyond her current assignment. The presence of the Navy Special Operations Officer suggested connections to the elite training programs that had previously been closed to her through bureaucratic limitations. There's been some discussion about whether current selection criteria for certain training programs adequately identify the most capable candidates, the Navy officer said carefully, his words chosen to convey meaning without explicitly discussing classified selection procedures. Recent combat operations have provided examples of exceptional performance by personnel who don't fit traditional profile expectations. The implication was clear, but required careful interpretation in an environment where direct discussion of selection policies might violate security protocols or administrative procedures. Sarah understood that the conversation was moving toward opportunities that had been previously unavailable, but the specific nature of those opportunities remained undefined. Colonel Martinez provided the clarity that the situation required. We've been asked to identify personnel who might benefit from specialized training opportunities that become available through non-standard selection procedures. Your combat record and demonstrated capabilities have made you a candidate for programs that typically use different evaluation criteria. The words carried implications that exceeded their surface meaning, suggesting that alternative pathways might exist for accessing training programs that had been closed through conventional application procedures. Sarah's exceptional combat performance had apparently created opportunities that transcended the bureaucratic limitations that had previously defined her career possibilities. What kind of specialized training? She asked carefully, knowing that the question touched on matters that might be classified beyond her current security clearance level. The Navy officer exchanged glances with the civilian before responding in terms that conveyed maximum information while maintaining operational security. Training programs that develop capabilities you've already demonstrated in combat operations. The difference would be formalized instruction in techniques you've been applying intuitively, along with exposure to operational environments that fully utilize your proven skills. Sarah understood that the conversation was approaching territory that required careful navigation between curiosity and operational security. The assembled group clearly represented interests that extended beyond her current unit's normal assignment authority, suggesting that the opportunities being discussed involved organizations with specialized missions and training requirements. There would be certain administrative requirements, Major Thompson continued, referring to procedures that would be necessary for transferring her to different organizational control. Security clearance upgrades, specialized medical evaluations, and training pipeline coordination that would take several weeks to complete. The timeline suggested that any opportunities being discussed would involve immediate action rather than long-term planning, indicating that her combat performance had created urgent interest from organizations that operated according to compressed decision-making cycles. Sarah felt the excitement of potential advancement balanced against uncertainty about specific requirements and expectations. Are you interested in pursuing opportunities that would fully utilize your demonstrated capabilities? Colonel Martinez asked directly, bringing the conversation to a decision point that would determine her future career trajectory. Sarah's response was immediate and unequivocal. Yes, sir. I'm very interested in any opportunity to serve at the highest level of my capabilities. The answer seemed to satisfy the assembled group, whose expressions reflected the relief of personnel who had been authorized to extend opportunities to someone whose acceptance was essential for program success. The Navy officer made notes in a folder that suggested administrative procedures were already being initiated to support whatever training pipeline had been discussed. Excellent, the civilian said, his tone indicating that preliminary discussions were now complete and that implementation procedures would begin immediately. We'll need to coordinate your transfer to temporary duty status while the various administrative requirements are completed. The training pipeline we're discussing typically begins within 30 days of candidate acceptance. The rapid timeline was both exciting and concerning, as it suggested that her current combat deployment would be terminated earlier than planned to accommodate training opportunities that couldn't be delayed for administrative convenience. Sarah understood that such urgency typically indicated either exceptional opportunity or exceptional operational requirements that demanded immediate action. "What about my current unit responsibilities?" she asked, knowing that her engineering expertise was essential for ongoing operations at Forward Operating Base Crimson. "Already coordinated," Major Thompson replied. "Your replacement is being flown in from Germany and should arrive within the week. Your transition briefing and equipment transfer can be completed before your departure for specialized training." The efficiency of the administrative arrangements suggested that the opportunities being discussed had been under consideration for some time, with preliminary coordination already completed to support rapid implementation once candidate acceptance had been confirmed. Sarah found herself impressed by the thoroughness of planning that had anticipated her agreement before the conversation had even begun. As the meeting concluded with exchanges of contact information and administrative timelines, Sarah reflected on the dramatic change in her career prospects that had occurred within a single week. The rejection letter that had seemed to close opportunities for elite training had been followed almost immediately by alternative pathways that promised access to exactly the kind of challenging military service she had always wanted to pursue. The irony was that her exclusion from conventional selection procedures had actually led to opportunities that might prove more valuable than the standard training pipeline she had originally sought to enter. Her combat performance had demonstrated capabilities that transcended bureaucratic limitations, creating interest from organizations that evaluated candidates based on proven performance rather than predictive statistics. Walking back to her quarters after the meeting, Sarah considered the implications of committing to training programs that remained largely undefined in terms of specific requirements and operational commitments. The assembled personnel had conveyed maximum information while maintaining operational security, but significant questions remained about what she would be asked to do and where such training might lead her career. The uncertainty was balanced by excitement about finally having access to opportunities that would fully challenge her capabilities and provide the kind of military service that had motivated her original enlistment. The rejection from conventional SEAL training had been painful, but the alternative pathway now available might prove superior in terms of personal and professional development. That evening, as she prepared administrative paperwork for her upcoming transfer to specialized training, Sarah reflected on the lessons learned through recent experiences about the relationship between institutional barriers and individual capability. Her combat performance had proven that official assessments of her potential were fundamentally flawed, opening opportunities that bureaucratic procedures had been designed to prevent. The rejection letter remained in her personal files as a reminder that persistence and exceptional performance could overcome systemic limitations that seemed insurmountable through conventional approaches. Her demonstrated capabilities under extreme pressure had created alternative pathways that transcended administrative barriers, proving that true military excellence would ultimately be recognized regardless of bureaucratic obstacles. As she completed her final combat mission reports and prepared for transition to an uncertain but exciting future, Sarah understood that her military career was about to enter a phase that would test everything she had learned about courage, competence, and commitment to service at the highest levels. The specialized training ahead would either confirm her potential for elite military service or reveal limitations that combat operations had not yet exposed. Either way, she would finally have the opportunity to discover the full extent of her capabilities in an environment designed to develop and utilize exceptional talent. The alternative pathway that had emerged from her combat Performance represented everything she had originally sought through conventional SEAL training, with the added advantage of being based on proven capability rather than predictive assessment. The future remained undefined, but filled with possibilities that exceeded anything she had imagined when she first decided to pursue elite military training. Her combat achievements had opened doors that standard application procedures had kept permanently closed, demonstrating that exceptional performance could create opportunities that transcended institutional limitations. The specialized training facility existed in a place that officially didn't appear on any military maps. Located on a remote island off the coast of California, the compound was accessible only by military aircraft that followed flight paths designed to avoid civilian observation. Sarah's journey to this secretive location had taken her through a series of administrative procedures that gradually increased her security clearance, while revealing nothing about the specific nature of the training she would receive. Her transportation had been arranged through channels that operated independently of normal military logistics, suggesting that the program she was entering existed outside conventional command structures. The aircraft that carried her to the island was unmarked and crewed by personnel who provided no information about their unit affiliations or the destination they were approaching. Upon arrival, Sarah found herself at a facility that resembled a cross between a university campus and a military training base. Modern buildings were scattered across carefully landscaped grounds that provided both aesthetic appeal and tactical training opportunities. The architecture suggested significant investment in creating an environment that could support extended training programs requiring both classroom instruction and practical application. Her initial processing was conducted by administrative personnel who demonstrated the kind of professional efficiency that characterized elite military organizations. Medical examinations, psychological evaluations, and security interviews were completed with thoroughness that exceeded anything she had previously experienced, suggesting that program standards were significantly higher than conventional military training requirements. Commander Rebecca Hayes was the officer responsible for candidate orientation and initial assessment. A career naval officer with extensive special operations experience, she possessed the kind of quiet authority that came from years of successful leadership in demanding environments. Her office overlooked training areas where other candidates could be seen conducting physical conditioning exercises that appeared significantly more challenging than standard military fitness programs. Welcome to the Advanced Maritime Operations Training Program, Commander Hayes said, using a designation that Sarah suspected was deliberately vague to maintain operational security. You're here because your combat performance has demonstrated capabilities that we believe can be developed into exceptional special operations skills. The program description was carefully worded to convey maximum information while maintaining the ambiguity necessary for classified operations. Sarah understood that she was being offered access to training that would develop the same capabilities taught in SEAL programs, but through alternative selection procedures that bypassed conventional bureaucratic limitations. The training pipeline consists of 3 phases spanning approximately 6 months. Commander Hayes continued, outlining a curriculum that combined physical conditioning, technical skill development, and operational preparation. Phase 1 focuses on fundamental skills and physical conditioning. Phase 2 covers advanced tactical techniques and specialized equipment. Phase 3 involves realistic training scenarios that simulate actual operational conditions. The timeline was significantly longer than she had anticipated, suggesting that the training would be comprehensive in ways that exceeded conventional military programs. Sarah felt excitement about finally accessing the kind of challenging instruction that would fully develop her potential, combined with uncertainty about what would be expected of her during such intensive preparation. What makes this program different from standard special operations training? She asked, knowing that the question touched on matters that might be classified beyond her current clearance level. Commander Hayes smiled slightly, recognizing the careful way the question had been phrased to respect operational security while seeking meaningful information. This program is designed for personnel who have already demonstrated exceptional capability under actual combat conditions. Instead of using predictive selection criteria, we evaluate candidates based on proven performance in real operational environments. The explanation confirmed Sarah's understanding that her combat achievements had created access to opportunities that conventional selection procedures would have prevented. Her demolitions work and tactical performance had provided evidence of capability that transcended bureaucratic assessments, opening pathways that were designed specifically for personnel who didn't fit standard profile expectations. The physical conditioning requirements will be challenging, but not impossible, Commander Hayes continued, addressing concerns that Sarah's smaller stature might create disadvantages in training designed for larger candidates. We've learned that operational effectiveness depends more on technique, endurance, and mental toughness than on raw physical strength. The reassurance was professionally delivered, but carried personal significance for Sarah, who had spent years proving that size limitations could be overcome through superior technique and determination. The program's recognition of these principles suggested that her training experience would be fundamentally different from conventional approaches that emphasized physical conformity over tactical innovation. Your first phase instructor will be Chief Petty Officer Martinez, Commander Hayes said, referring to a senior enlisted specialist whose reputation Sarah would soon discover. He's responsible for fundamental skills development and initial conditioning. His methods are demanding but effective for developing the foundation skills necessary for advanced training. The introduction process concluded with administrative details about housing, equipment issue, and training schedules that would define her life for the next 6 months. Sarah found herself assigned to quarters that were comfortable but Spartan, designed to support focused training without unnecessary distractions that might interfere with program objectives. Her first meeting with Chief Martinez occurred at dawn the following morning, when she reported to a physical training area that overlooked the Pacific Ocean. The setting was both beautiful and intimidating, suggesting that training would combine aesthetic inspiration with physical challenges that would test every aspect of her conditioning and determination. Chief Martinez was a compact, weathered veteran whose presence commanded immediate respect from anyone with military experience. His career had included multiple combat deployments and specialized assignments that had refined his understanding of what was required to develop exceptional military capabilities. He evaluated new candidates with the analytical eye of someone who could predict training success based on subtle indicators that others might miss. "I've read your combat reports," he said simply, his tone conveying professional respect earned through proven performance under extreme pressure. Impressive demolitions work under conditions that would have challenged much more experienced engineers. The question now is whether you can translate that combat effectiveness into the broader skill set required for special operations. The assessment was fair but demanding, acknowledging her demonstrated capabilities while making it clear that program success would require development of additional skills that hadn't been tested in her previous military experience. Sarah appreciated the honest evaluation, which avoided both false encouragement and discouraging pessimism about her potential for program completion. Physical conditioning began immediately with exercises that tested every aspect of fitness, while introducing techniques that would be essential for maritime operations. Swimming, diving, underwater navigation, and amphibious assault procedures formed the foundation of training that would gradually increase in complexity and difficulty throughout the first phase. Sarah's smaller stature proved advantageous in several areas, particularly underwater operations where her reduced air consumption allowed longer dive times than larger candidates could achieve. Her mechanical aptitude translated effectively to equipment maintenance and underwater demolitions techniques that required precise manipulation of complex systems under challenging environmental conditions. The academic component of training introduced her to operational planning, intelligence analysis, and tactical decision-making procedures that would be essential for successful mission completion in complex operational environments. Classroom instruction was combined with practical exercises that tested her ability to apply theoretical knowledge under simulated stress conditions. Her fellow candidates represented diverse backgrounds and capabilities, but all had been selected based on exceptional performance in previous military assignments rather than conventional selection criteria. The group included personnel from various military specializations who had demonstrated skills that program administrators believed could be developed into special operations capabilities. Working with this exceptional group provided Sarah with insights into different approaches to tactical problem-solving and operational effectiveness. She learned to appreciate capabilities that complemented her own skills, while contributing her unique expertise to team efforts that required diverse talents for mission success. Phase 1 training concluded after 10 weeks with comprehensive evaluations that tested every skill that had been developed during the intensive instruction period. Sarah's performance consistently ranked in the top tier of candidates, particularly in areas that required technical precision and calm decision-making under pressure. Chief Martinez's final evaluation noted her exceptional progress in developing capabilities that built upon her demonstrated combat effectiveness. Outstanding adaptation to maritime operations training, he wrote. Demonstrated ability to master complex technical skills while maintaining exceptional performance under stress. Highly recommended for Phase 2 advanced training. Phase 2 instruction introduced advanced tactical techniques and specialized equipment that would be essential for conducting complex special operations missions in hostile environments. The training became significantly more challenging as candidates learned to operate sophisticated technology while managing multiple operational variables simultaneously. Sarah excelled in courses covering advanced demolitions, precision marksmanship, and small unit tactics that built upon skills she had developed through combat experience. Her proven ability to perform effectively under extreme pressure translated perfectly to training scenarios that simulated the stress and complexity of actual special operations missions. The diving and underwater operations curriculum proved particularly demanding, requiring mastery of techniques that went far beyond basic swimming and breath-holding skills. Sarah learned to navigate underwater using specialized equipment, conduct covert insertion and extraction operations, and perform complex tasks while managing limited air supplies and hostile environmental conditions. Her instructors noted consistent excellence in technical skill development combined with exceptional composure during training exercises that were designed to test candidate responses to unexpected complications and equipment failures. Sarah's mechanical background proved invaluable when dealing with sophisticated equipment that required immediate troubleshooting under challenging conditions. Advanced weapons training introduced her to specialized firearms and explosive devices that were specifically designed for special operations missions. Her existing marksmanship skills provided an excellent foundation for learning precision shooting techniques with specialized equipment, while her demolitions experience translated effectively to advanced explosive applications. The tactical leadership component of Phase 2 training tested her ability to plan and execute complex missions, while managing team dynamics and operational variables that could affect mission success. Sarah discovered that her combat experience had developed decision-making capabilities that proved highly effective in training scenarios, requiring immediate tactical adaptation. Her performance evaluations consistently reflected exceptional progress in developing skills that built upon her proven combat capabilities while introducing new techniques that would be essential for special operations effectiveness. Instructors noted her ability to maintain exceptional performance standards while helping other candidates overcome training challenges. Phase 2 concluded with field training exercises that simulated actual special operations missions in realistic environments that tested every skill developed during the advanced instruction period. Sarah's team successfully completed every assigned mission while demonstrating tactical innovation and operational effectiveness that exceeded instructor expectations. The final evaluation process included comprehensive testing that measured both individual capabilities and team performance during complex operational scenarios. Sarah's results confirmed her potential for exceptional special operations service, with particular strengths in technical applications and leadership under pressure. Phase 3 training represented the culmination of the program, combining all previously learned skills into realistic operational scenarios that simulated actual special operations missions. The training environment became indistinguishable from real combat conditions, testing candidate capabilities under circumstances that demanded flawless execution of complex procedures. Sarah found herself leading mission planning sessions for operations that required coordination of multiple tactical elements while managing operational security and mission timeline constraints. Her combat experience proved invaluable in developing realistic assessments of operational challenges and effective solutions for achieving mission objectives. The advanced mission scenarios tested every aspect of special operations capability, from covert insertion and intelligence gathering to direct action operations, requiring precise coordination of multiple team elements. Sarah's proven ability to perform effectively under extreme pressure translated perfectly to training that replicated the stress and complexity of actual operational environments. Her final evaluation noted exceptional performance across all training areas, with particular recognition for technical expertise and leadership capabilities that had been consistently demonstrated throughout the intensive 6-month program. The assessment concluded with recommendations for immediate assignment to operational special operations units requiring the capabilities she had developed. Commander Hayes conducted the final briefing session that would determine Sarah's future assignment to operational units that could fully utilize her specialized training. The meeting took place in her office overlooking training areas where new candidates were beginning the same intensive program that Sarah had just completed successfully. Your performance throughout the program has been exceptional, Commander. Hayes began, reviewing evaluation reports that documented consistent excellence across all training areas. You've demonstrated exactly the kind of capability that this program was designed to develop, while proving that alternative selection procedures can identify outstanding candidates who don't fit conventional profile expectations. The assessment was gratifying validation of everything Sarah had worked to achieve through years of military service that had culminated in access to the elite training she had always sought. Her proven combat effectiveness had created opportunities that bureaucratic limitations would have prevented, demonstrating that exceptional performance could transcend institutional barriers. You'll be assigned to Maritime Special Operations Group 7. Commander Hayes continued, referring to an operational unit that conducted the most challenging special operations missions in maritime environments. They specifically requested personnel with your combination of technical expertise and proven combat effectiveness. The assignment represented everything Sarah had hoped to achieve through her military career, providing access to operational challenges that would fully utilize her specialized training while serving alongside the most capable special operations personnel in the military. Her alternative pathway to elite service had proven superior to conventional selection procedures that had excluded her based on flawed assessment criteria. 6 months later, Sarah found herself preparing for her first operational mission as a fully qualified special operations team member. The assignment involved a complex infiltration operation requiring exactly the combination of technical skills and combat effectiveness that had characterized her military service from the beginning. Standing on the deck of a submarine that would deliver her team to their operational area, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her from a small farming town in Nebraska to the elite ranks of military special operations. The rejection letter that had seemed to end her dreams had actually led to opportunities that exceeded anything she had originally imagined possible. Her combat performance had demonstrated capabilities that transcended bureaucratic limitations, creating alternative pathways that proved more valuable than conventional selection procedures. The specialized training she had received was specifically designed for personnel who had already proven themselves under actual operational conditions, making it more relevant and effective than programs based on predictive assessment criteria. The mission ahead would test everything she had learned through intensive training while providing the opportunity to contribute to operations that required the highest levels of military capability. Sarah understood that her success would help demonstrate the value of alternative selection procedures that evaluated candidates based on proven performance rather than administrative conformity. As her team prepared for insertion into hostile territory, where their technical expertise and combat effectiveness would be essential for mission success, Sarah felt the quiet confidence that came from knowing she belonged among the most capable military personnel in the world. Her proven abilities had earned her place in the elite ranks of special operations, where exceptional performance was the only standard that mattered. The submarine began its approach to the operational area where Sarah's team would conduct a mission requiring exactly the combination of skills that had made her an ideal candidate for specialized training. Her demolitions expertise, proven combat effectiveness, and specialized maritime operations training would be essential for achieving objectives that conventional forces couldn't accomplish. Her military career had taken her from rejection based on bureaucratic limitations to acceptance based on proven capability, demonstrating that true military excellence would ultimately be recognized regardless of institutional barriers. The alternative pathway that had emerged from her combat performance had provided access to elite training and operational assignments that exceeded anything conventional selection procedures could have offered. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.